Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Sowing Resilience, which is, as all of you know, a conversation on Breathe, which is a fantastic project that has been involving lots of makers over the last year. My name is Shauna McCabe, and I'm the director of the Art Gallery of Guelph, and I'd like to welcome you all to this discussion and offer a welcome also to our guests, Breathe founders Natalie Bertin and Teresa Shepherd, as well as artists Teresa Burrows, Kwan, Naomi Smith, and TAALRUMI, whose work is all part of the touring exhibition that will be on view at the Art Gallery of Guelph as soon as we are able to open, which is, we're hoping, July 21st. To begin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement on behalf of the Art Gallery of Guelph, which is hosting this dialogue tonight. This statement is crucial for cultural institutions, as you know, as a land acknowledgement confronts the ongoing effects of colonialism that underpins the history of our institutions. Not only have art galleries and museums utilized deeply colonial methods of representation historically, but because of their authority, these narratives have been accepted as truth, informing policies as well as practices. Guelph, Ontario is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. And as we gather here this evening, we would like to acknowledge that the Art Gallery of Guelph resides on the ancestral lands of the Attawandaron people, and more recently, the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize the significance of the Dish with One Spoon covenant to this land and offer our respect to our Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Métis neighbors as we strive to strengthen our relationships with them. We express our gratitude and recognize our responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live, work, and create. And as we are all gathered virtually today, connected and yet physically dispersed in places across the country, it is also a good moment to reflect on the significance of place wherever we are, and in doing so, recognize the different traditional lands that we reside in and move through on a daily basis. We acknowledge the elders, past, present, and future of these lands with gratitude and respect. A few details, everyone has been muted for this conversation, and we would invite you to please use the chat area for questions for the participants as we go along, and we'll return to the questions after the conversation. So please feel free to use the chat. We're also grateful for the support, as always, of the Ontario Arts Council and Canada Council for the Arts, for everything we do, for all of our programs and exhibitions. And finally, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole Neufeld, who is the Art Gallery of Guelph's Community Engagement Coordinator, who will continue.
Thank you, Shauna. And I want to start by expressing my deep gratitude to the artists who are here to share their insights into the making and meaning of their masks. Joining us this evening, we have Teresa Burrows, TAALRUMI, Kwan, Naomi Smith, Natalie Bertin, Teresa Shepherd. These are just 6 of the 32 artists whose masks are represented in an exhibition currently up at the Art Gallery of Guelph. And Breathe is an exhibition of handcrafted masks named after the community of artists that gathered online during the pandemic. This community grew out of a question asked in the early days of the pandemic by Métis artists Natalie and Lisa. Why am I not seeing beaded masks anywhere? And so they launched a Facebook group and simply called this group Breathe to invite artists to design beaded masks that reflect their experiences as they navigated the changing COVID-19 conditions. So the Art Gallery of Guelph is showing the second touring exhibition emerging from the Breathe project. One exhibition wasn't enough because there are so many beautiful masks that have come out of this project. And in this iteration, we have 44 masks that speak to both the cultural resilience and strength of community in the face of the pandemic. Acknowledging this global impact of the virus, the initiative has encompassed mask designs of any artists working with traditional beadwork techniques, as well as many other materials and methods, creating space for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists. So again, I want to thank you all for being here and spending your evening with us. First, I'd like to, I'm sure many of you have gone and visited the Breathe Facebook group. I hope you have. If you haven't, run, don't walk, and get there and see the amazing work that is there. But I thought I'd ask Natalie and Lisa to start with a little bit of an introduction as to how the project started, yes, but more so what it has grown into being and what it means for the community of makers that have gathered there. So maybe Natalie, you can start with a little bit of background, but also from your perspective, this meaning of the community that has grown, and we'll take a look at some of the masks that are included in the Art Gallery of Guelph exhibition while you speak to that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us for this panel. It's amazing. I'm always amazed every time I'm on a Zoom conference that we're able to do this. 10 years ago, we would not have been able to do this. So, I know that we can't hug each other and all that physically, but I think it's amazing that we can still come together. I guess ultimately, when the pandemic first started, for me, it was the lack of artwork. Usually during times that are difficult, especially like a pandemic or political turmoil, you start to see artwork being made by artists. There's that expression. That's the best time to see incredible art. I wasn't seeing any. And so the question came to mind, why is that? And so, I posted the question. Lisa responded pretty much immediately. And, we've known each other for several years, so it was easy to have a conversation about, what we were seeing, what we weren't seeing, what we thought the problem might be. And so that's where the idea started. What it grew into was something phenomenal. We based the project on our teachings. But it's not an Indigenous project. It's a community project for anyone who wants to participate. And so absolutely proud of that. Lisa, please jump in.
Yeah, no, Natalie, you said that very well. I think that for myself, when we were forced into isolation, I feel like myself and a lot of artists are super feelers. So you couldn't ignore a pandemic, you couldn't ignore being put into isolation. And, I think that working through and creating was the way out. It was the way to find community, to connect to other artists and to express what we were going through. And it's like just unlocking, putting it out there was enough to kind of get the creative juices going and be able to create again. So for myself, that's the purpose that it served in the very beginning, and it's just grown into something. I feel like now, largely Natalie and I have just like stepped out of the way because it has a spirit of its own and it's got this momentum, and we're just so proud of the work that all of these artists have done and the vulnerability that they've shown to be able to speak their truth through such a difficult time.
It is amazing to see such personal responses to the question of making as it relates to a mask. As we look through all of the, and I'm going to turn to Jenna, who is helping us in the back end. Thank you, Jenna. Maybe you can scroll through some of the next slides to show our viewers just the incredible array of masks that are part of this project. This is just a selection, not only that have been shown in the exhibition at the Art Gallery of Guelph, but I think there's one just opened at the Royal Alberta Museum. Is that right?
Opens next week.
Opens next week.
Yes.
So yes, as we look through all of these masks, we see that there is an incredible amount of personal reflection and experience that goes into the making of these masks. They're all handcrafted. all incredibly unique, and speaking to these personal and cultural experiences with different intentions, different aesthetics. So what I'd like to do is start by inviting each of the artists who are here this evening to talk about your own mask and what it means, your choices of materials and techniques, and why it is important for you to work with those traditional practices or materials, and what other specific materials kind of uniquely express this moment and this experience that we are collectively having, but that manifests itself so differently for each individual. And so, what experiences and intentions shaped your approach? So we had the privilege of having a sneak peek into what Naomi is up to. She was, when we first jumped on the call, just as a group, she was still making, still beading. So maybe Naomi, I'm going to ask Jenna to flip over to Naomi's mask, but maybe Naomi, you can speak to your mask, your practice, and what experiences and intentions shaped your approach.
Thank you, and thank you to Natalie and Lisa and the Art Gallery of Guelph for, again, hosting our work. Usually when I'm creating something, I just draw upon my experiences. They can be like from when I was young. They can be experience. And it was actually Lisa and Natalie that kind of nudged me into the first Breathe experience, where I made a more typical looking piece. And at the time I was trying to explain to them, this was when we were in our first lockdown, I said, I don't really feel like beading, which was a foreign experience for me because I bead all the time and I love beading, and I'll bead whenever I can, even if it's just gonna stitch in here and there. And so it was that first experience where it kind of, I guess, brought me out of what I was experiencing from the pandemic. And Lisa summarized it perfectly by talking about that feeling of isolation. And I was trying to say to Lisa, I said, I've never had that feeling where I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to do anything creative, because normally all of my experiences are defined through the process of creating art pieces. And I've been beading since I was 7. So I've been doing this for a fairly long time, at least I think so. And so I decided this time around, again, when I got a little nudge from the Breathe crew to participate. And again, I was thinking, okay. It's like, sometimes I need a little bit of coaxing to put a piece together. But I'd already been thinking about it. I'd already been thinking about how my dragonfly designs sort of lent themselves to the mask shape and everything. And sometimes I don't even call myself a bead artist. I say, I'm just a bead architect, because you sort of have to put everything together. And what was particularly interesting about this piece is that I've combined so many techniques. Pretty much anything I've ever known about beading has been incorporated into this piece. And the subject matter itself, the dragonfly, tells the story of my relationship with the natural world, with dragonflies in particular. Every summer they always come out, and if I'm out in the yard, they'll like land on my shoulder. And they would do that even when I was a little girl. And I always remember I was never afraid of that. Like sometimes, we see a spider and we kind of jump and we're caught off guard by that. But I was never afraid of these dragonflies. So in my mind, I always felt that I had that connection there. And so dragonflies are reflected quite often in the pieces that I make. And the mask itself is titled, "Oh, Let Me Be Free." And so it was a perfect way to sort of express how I was feeling with, the second lockdown and not being able to go out and just being at home all the time. And so I was just like, just let me be free. And then I thought, perfect title for my piece because, you know, dragonflies themselves, you know, they spend the first 6 years of their life kind of in a nymph stage in water, and they're, you know, they're contained. And then one day they mature and they become these beautiful winged beings, and then they can fly everywhere. And so I was thinking about that process as well. And so as it evolved, I kept adding elements to it. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do everything that I possibly can imagine in terms of a beading technique, materials. I've used antique materials in there. I've used 24 karat gold. I've used antique cat's eye. So I used all kinds of different things that I had kicking around that I'm always looking at stuff and going, I should use that sometime. And so it factored into my work, and this was a perfect opportunity to do that. And so, yeah, this is a piece that's over the top, and I'm always explaining to people, I go, it's an art piece, you know, even though it's presented under the guise of being a mask per se. So yeah, that was sort of the background story to my creative experience in sewing this mask. Chimigwich.
Thank you, Naomi. And maybe I can ask just a really quick question. What was it about this project or coming through the experience pandemic that made you want to do this over the top, you know, pull out all the stops, use every technique, every precious material that you, like there's a lot of preciousness to this mask as well, that we sort of think of often as, you know, in terms of, you know, I know you said this is an art piece, but the masks that we wear day to day have a disposable sort of clinical kind of feel, but this is anything but. So just what was it that drove you to do that over the top?
Well, I think as artists, and I'm pretty sure everyone that's joined us tonight, my fellow artists that I feel honored to be here with, we're always trying to push our art form. We're always trying to learn something. We're always trying to apply a technique that we know in a different way. And that's how you develop. That's how your art pieces become what they are. And you're always moving forward. And I'm very committed to that. And so I had like a lot of things to think about when I was putting this piece together. Like, this is the first time I've done a little raised section in the middle where I've encased the dragonfly button, and then figuring out the gusset system, all of those sorts of things, you know. But I was up for the challenge because I knew that I was going to be pressing forward with my artistic experience, and in fact, you know, learning things. And learning for me is a big catalyst in creating something that I wouldn't typically do. It's a growth thing.
Well, I think, I mean, it's certainly, we'll touch on this a little bit later, perhaps, because I do want to give everybody a chance to speak, but it certainly offers up that sense of growth and moving forward. And there's a certain quality to this work that gives us hope in many ways. So thank you for that. With this idea of drawing on the natural world, Naomi, you talked about how dragonflies were something that that, you know, it was a part of the natural world that you never feared, and they kind of give you that sort of strength. And so I'd like to actually offer up an opportunity to Teresa. Teresa, I'm hoping you're still on with us, because wolves have featured so prominently in your work, and of course take center stage in your mask. So maybe you can feel free to start wherever, but if you can tell us about your mask and your practice, Teresa. Teresa, are you there still?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, Little Wolf Howl from Treaty 5 land. I live up in northern Manitoba on the lake. It's Paint Lake, which is an excellent little piece of paradise. Thompson, very close to me, is somehow a place that thinks it's the wolf capital of Canada. So I guess that had a little bit to do with it. I have worked as a professional craft artist, probably doing beading for about 15 plus years. I started in paints and photography and other stuff. Again, my thanks to Natalie and Lisa and all of the art galleries that are involved with putting these tour of these masks together, because it's been such an excellent opportunity to showcase beadwork and the many ways people incorporate glass beads with other materials. This particular mask, I have to say, I was so inspired by the other stories and narratives of artists that were putting things up on Breathe, and each time I would see them, it would sort of send this little jealous, you know how they say you have two wolves? Well, the little jealous wolf would be saying, oh my, come on. And you always want to step it up when you see some of the other wonderful things people are doing. I really enjoyed putting together my first mask for the Breathe first wave, and I thought, okay, I need to do something. So the pandemic has been about sacrifices and loss of people. And for me, people always have to have faces. And a lot of my beadwork does focus on doing portrait of people. But a number of years ago, I was doing other kinds of masks, sort of almost more masquerade type masks, and they were paper masks, and I was doing them with students, and we were doing a lot of wolves. And I had started beading a wolf mask at that time, and I said, well, why not take this, because I had abandoned it, take this, see what I can do to make it into something else. And it had originated as exploration of sort of Celtic ideas of she who swallows the dead. And so it evolved from that into the concept of sacrifice and the fact that not all of the pack arrives along the journey to the place they're going. And certainly with the pandemic, we've seen that. And so that takes a considerable amount of strength to acknowledge that we're losing people we care about. And so this past time, just before the pandemic, I lost my mom, and I didn't bead for 3 months. And then during the pandemic, my sort of northern mother, sister, Elder Heather York from Norrie House also died. And so it was one of those things where you start thinking about, well, who are part of your pack? How have they contributed to your strength and the strength of those around us? And so sometimes wearing a mask for me was about saying, not today, virus. This is my way of saying I have strength to get through this. So Howl sort of originated out of the idea that that the people have been important in this pandemic. The sacrifice and loss is something that we continue to deal with, and that we can use our creativity and we can explore our feelings and showcase the strengths that we have in whatever talents we have to give to making things better during difficult times. How does that sound?
That's wonderful, Teresa, and thank you for that sort of the story of your work. Teresa, you talked a little bit about some of these amazing women in your life that have influenced your practice and your world. And I'm wondering if you can comment on briefly why the wolf for you is representative of those women in your life?
Well, you'll notice something about this wolf. First of all, she's very blingy. She's got lots of sparkle to her, and that's not necessarily the way we always see wolves. But this is a wolf, and both these women, I think, were very body conscious, but they were body conscious to the point where part of their strength was they didn't want to be burdens to others. So they're always trying to make you comfortable and make you feel like they were doing okay. The wolf at times seems a little bit pudgy, and she was, and she is, and so anybody who sees her only sees the outside of her and sees her maybe at face value, but tucked inside, and actually tucked inside this particular mask, are the ashes of my mother, who was an artist. She was my model for years, and certainly an inspiration for that. And she would have loved to have been going to art galleries, something I really miss, having been trapped in the north. I'm actually, after, I don't think the last time I got out was in August, I'm actually heading out tomorrow. So it's been a lot of isolation. And so tucked inside is a little piece of my mother to travel around with all this art. So it's, these two women are something to howl about.
Well, the strength of these figures in your life certainly comes through in the resolve of the eyes of this wolf. So, and it's wonderful to have. It's powerful to have that expression coming through this mask, touring around. So thank you, Teresa, for sharing your story. I'm going to turn it over to TAALRUMI, whose mask is called The Bounty of Our Land. So much imagery here, and I'll let you speak to this.
Akana ubanga atira TAALRUMI enuvialu yunga tuktuyak tung mutak. Hello, my name is TAALRUMI. I am Inuvialuit, and I'm from Tuktoyaktuk, from the Inuvialuit settlement region in the Northwest Territories. So I created this piece in response to the call out from the Breathe page. I was so inspired seeing everyone's masks, and I was fortunate to have had my sealskin masks chosen for the first round of Breathe. And then I had a vision of this mask, something I wanted to do that really represents my hometown and everything in Inuvialuit. So I began the process of putting my vision onto this piece of moose hide in the form of beadwork. And the main thing I wanted to convey was the landscape of my home community, Tuktoyaktuk. So historically, the land provided everything that we needed to survive, the land and the water, you know, animals, plants, fish, berries, whale, everything. And just thinking about all this, teaching my children, you know, where they come from, our history, trying to ease their worries that we hadn't been able to see my family or make a visit home in such a long time. So I started telling them, well, you know, we'll be okay. We descend from strong Inuvialuit. Every Inuvialuit alive today descends from survivors of disease. So approximately 100 years ago, the Inuvialuit population was decimated to near extinction because of previously unknown disease brought in with the fur trade, with whalers, with colonization. And during those times, my grandparents were young children and they witnessed a lot of death. They fetched water from the river to help people who were sick and dying. Then later on in the 1950s, my Jeju, my Gwich'in grandmother, and my Ananuk, my Inuvialuit grandmother, both were hospitalized with tuberculosis. They were isolated and hospitalized. They had to leave behind their young families, including their babies, who were my mom and dad. And so many families have gone through these circumstances. You know, many families in my community, in the broader Inuit community, many Indigenous families across Canada have experienced these things. So just telling my children, you know, a bit about our family history, Inuvialuit history, just helps us to have hope that, okay, we come from survivors. You know, we've been through this. This is going to be okay. We're living in modern times. We have more comforts. You know, we have the internet, iPads, you know, things to keep us busy. So even though that isolating was difficult, there was still hope. And I just tried to convey all that in this mask, and representing all the animals that we used to survive. So some of the most obvious ones were the sealskin walrus tusks. The walrus was a very important animal, and we represented the walrus tusks on our clothing. You can see. So it's a very distinguishing feature of Inuvialuit clothing, and I wanted to put that on the mask. So if you look back to really old times, some of our dancers would wear masks with walrus tusks to just dance in a more dramatic fashion to convey the stories that were being passed on. And just the use of sealskin also gives an opportunity to educate about the importance of seal, that people often have an issue with that. And I just tried to use as many natural materials as I could, including reindeer antler, fish vertebrae. There's wolverine fur, polar bear fur. So all of these were so important for our survival. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that I live on Quigley Tene traditional territory, which is Prince George, BC, and that's where I'm calling in from today.
Thank you. It sounds as though this mask, while it sort of represents a story for your family, and the conversations that you're having at home with your kids, it also has very much, there are elements within the materiality that speak to a political discourse, and some work that's happening within that context. Was this a work that you made as a point of education for the public? Was it more made for your family? Can you sort of both? Can you talk about to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I would say a little of both. So not only, you know, I want to preserve some of the stories and the history of Inuvialuit within this art piece, but it also gives an opportunity to talk about the importance of the animals that we harvest sustainably, respectfully. And a lot of times as Indigenous artists, you know, we experience, we get, you know, trouble or negativity for using natural materials like, you know, sealskin or hides or bones, things like that. If, you know, if you're not familiar with it, it can seem a bit scary, or if you don't understand it, it seems gross in a way, just from some of the comments that I've personally had. So just using these materials in this way on this piece just lends an opportunity to educate about, you know, why we use these materials, why are they important, and especially with the sealskin. Many Inuits still use many of the same materials and practice the same traditions that we have since time immemorial, and one of those is using sealskin. So many Canadians have an issue with it because they think of seals as cute and cuddly and all the anti-sealing propaganda, I want to say. But the fact is that, you know, Inuit hunt sustainably, respectfully, using most or all parts of the animal. So just being able to use the sealskin in this way just lends an opportunity to share and to explain from our point of view why it's important.
Mm-hmm. And it is thank you for sharing that perspective with us, and also sharing this work so that we can have some of these conversations here at the art gallery, but also as this exhibition tours and we have these kinds of dialogues around your work.
Yes, Queen Aini, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, just to be included among this caliber of artists, and not only for me personally, but just to have an evaluate representation on this level. I'm so thankful, Queen Aini.
Thank you. Natalie, I'm going to turn it to you to talk about some of the stories that have shaped your work.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about the one on the right first. That one's called Finding the Acorns. So I hunt actually every fall and every spring and gather, and we do a lot of harvesting of natural foods. And so it was during one of these periods when I was hunting that, I came to realize that, I might be an odd duck because I actually like being isolated. It doesn't bother me to be in the woods by myself. And to watch the world. And if we do sit long enough, we can start seeing the connections. And I came to realize that, there was also a lot of connections with the way we are being asked to face COVID in isolation. We're being asked to stay home, to keep ourselves busy in other ways, or to do things. And during that time, there's an awful lot of time to think, and there's an awful lot of time to watch and observe and reflect. Same with when you're waiting for your game to come by, or when you're going through long, walks and hikes in the woods as you're harvesting. It's not just go here, go there, go there, go there, next stop. It's stop, look around, listen, take your time. What are you hearing? What's going on with the weather? What's going on with, the animals? So a lot of these connections started coming through, and it wasn't just about hunting. It was also about COVID. And during this time, I'd also lost an elder, the elder who actually taught me how to hunt, passed of cancer. And I call it the other big C now, because COVID seems to have taken over, but I lost this elder who had taught me everything about hunting. So it was a very kind of reflective hunting season for me at that time. And one of the things that kept coming back to me, which also relates to COVID, is when you can sit back and take the time to reflect, just look, just observe, find the acorns. And that's where you'll find your deer or your prey or whatever. And so the same thing can be said about, whether you're sitting at home and you're bored or whatever, find the acorns, find those little, things that make you happy, the things to be grateful about, and that's where you'll find your hope and your, inspiration to keep moving on or to do other things. So that's that mask. The other mask on the left is She Who Brings the Light. December 21st, the winter solstice, is my absolute favorite day of the year. It is, to me, a day of hope. It's maybe the darkest day of the year, but it's the day where I know the light will start coming back. And one of the tales that I learned a long time ago was about how the matriarch caribou grabbed the sun in her antlers and put it back into the sky. And so that to me is like the symbol of hope. And it's a very powerful day for me spiritually. And so what I wanted to do with this mask was to share that feeling that, it's going to be okay. The light's coming back, spring's around the corner. We're going to be able to grow food again, go outside. We won't be so locked in the house anymore. COVID will eventually go away. And so it was the hope, I guess, I was trying to share not just for myself, but you know, for everybody else, to be able to create a piece of art that would maybe hopefully uplift people and give them that feeling that, you know, we're okay, you know, we're gonna be okay, you know. I'm the eternal optimist, what can I tell you? But you know, in terms of materials, being Métis, mixed blood, however you want to say it, politically, whatever, we're not going to go there, but you know, it depends on who you talk to, I guess. I'm either Métis or mixed blood. Basically, the use of materials as a multidisciplinary artist, I like using different materials anyway. I do that in my paintings. I'm not as experienced a beater as some of my colleagues here. I've only been beading for a few years, but even in my paintings, I do more painting and visual arts, like you know, drawing and stuff like that. But even in those projects, I always use a lot of different materials, and I like to mix and experiment and do different things to see how it's going to come out. It's all about the color. It's all about, you know, how things are going to pop, and, you know, how I'm going to best, whatever material is needed to best express the idea that I'm trying to get across. So the same thing goes with these masks, in that I didn't just bead them, I also used quills in some of them, embroidery, silk embroidery in other ones. And that just basically expresses, you know, the different parts of me, my different ancestors, and the things that I learned from all these different ancestors, whether they were Anishinaabe, whether they're French, whether they're whoever, right, Métis. It's all to me, it's a symbolic way to represent my ancestors in my work. So there.
Natalie, I have to say, I'm trying to question myself why I'm so taken with this, but I find when I see the two works side by side, I really am drawn to the contrast between the ties that you used for both of these masks. On finding the acorns, it seems fairly utilitarian in a material for that part that is the tie that goes around the back of your head, whereas the other is delicate, has a richness to it, has the texture, feels like I want to reach out and touch it. Can you, maybe I'm out on a limb here, but can you speak to your choice of materials for the ties and how it sort of connects with the two masks that you made?
Sure. Well, for the orange one, when you go hunting, you have to be prepared. You have to have equipment that is strong and durable. You have to be able to rely on your equipment, because if you're going off like for hours and hours into the bush, you can't just, you know, hop in the car. Where we go hunting anyway, you're walking for several hours before you get to anywhere. So I can't just jump in the car. It's not drive-by camping and stuff. It's actual hunting, like for real. So you know, I have to have the tools that I will need, and they have to be durable, they have to be light, and they have to be the kind of equipment that you would take to these things. So that's, you know, that's why that one probably looks more utilitarian, because it's meant to. Whereas the one on the left, the ties are a lot lighter, because I was thinking of snow. And you know how, you know, the air in the wintertime when it's a crisp blue day and you're out in the middle of a frozen lake, and you might have a few, you know, crystals or whatever floating through the air. That's what I was feeling, you know, at that time. And so I wanted to try to get a tie that would also reflect, it would complete the mask more, to reflect that kind of feeling.
It certainly does. Once you describe that really crisp, sparkly air that you see at only the coldest and sort of the shortest days of the year, it really does kind of capture that sense of the hope of the solstice, of the turning of the seasons, of the turning towards more light. So yeah, I can see, I see why the choice of ties does matter.
Mhm.
I'm going to turn it over to Dawn. Dawn, you also have a really interesting choice of materials, the ties as well, but I'll invite you to speak about your work.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and it's so nice to actually see like the faces and voices, and hear the voices of other artists from the Breathe group. Yes, so I am Don Kwan. I'm a third generation Chinese Canadian queer visual artist. I'm here, born and raised here in Ottawa. I have a studio outside of Ottawa, like north of in the Ottawa Valley in the Whitewater region area. My artwork is informed by like my experiences. I weave a lot of my cultural knowledge and stories and histories into my artwork. Often like my art is very autobiographic in nature. So yeah, like my family, we own and have operated the Shanghai restaurant in Ottawa's Chinatown for over 50 years. It was opened in 1971 by my grandparents, uncle, and parents. So I was basically born and raised in Chinatown and raised in the restaurant business. So March 13th, when the government told people we had to lock down, close our businesses, that day we were hosting a drag queen bingo. My brother is a drag queen performer, and his persona is China Doll. So that evening we noticed people were calling to cancel their reservation anyways. We had a full house, but people were, slowly, they had been listening to the news about the lockdown and COVID spreading. So March 13th was basically the last day of the restaurant. So then the next day, I was a complete wreck. I was just kind of thinking of the business and thinking of the community. And then I was thinking of my art and the loss of inspiration. And also just prior to COVID hitting, I had lost both my parents the previous year. So I was kind of mourning their passing as well. So I was mourning a lot, mourning passing of my parents, mourning the closure of the restaurant, mourning for people around the world, that were dying around the world. But then, COVID wasn't the only thing that I was facing at the time. Racism, unfortunately kind of reared its ugly head again. I won't say his name, but the past US president, popularized COVID as the China virus, the Kung Fu flu. So there was a lot of anti-Asian kind of sentiments kind of creeping into social media and politics. And ironically, the thing is I kind of saw all that accumulating before the lockdown. Town was really quiet. The restaurant was, on a Saturday night, there wouldn't be as many people on a Saturday night. So that kind of fear of going into Chinatown before the lockdown was already there. So then also the fear of all the Chinatowns across Canada being targeted with hate crimes and vandalism and violence, and hearing about all the increased violence towards seniors and stuff. So that weekend of March 13th, I was trying to gather up strength. And I kind of reminded myself of what is resilience. And then I thought about that, and I thought it's, reminded me of several things my parents, the strength and the power that like my parents and my ancestors before me, like what they faced with like racism, and my grandfather all the way back like 3 generations, he paid the head tax, lived through all those like exclusionary laws. And then thinking about my parents and what they went through and the hardships they went through. And then myself as a queer artist, I was reminded about, you know, all the resilience and advocacy of all the heroes, like in the queer community, like the LGBTQ plus community that kind of like, you know, survived through the stigma of the AIDS crisis, through like advocacy, through Stonewall, through like Pink Triangle movements. So all those kind of like, I was channeling all those spirits and all the power from my parents, my ancestors, and thinking, you know what, COVID isn't that bad. All of a sudden, like I kept thinking, you know, I could, like, I have so much working for me. I could easily work through this this weekend. And it had really thinking about my ancestors and the people before me really helped me move forward and push myself forward. So then, prior to COVID-19, I was working on a series called Invisible Identities. It's a series of articles of clothing that mimic like uniforms that a waiter or servers in a Chinese Canadian restaurant wear. And it was all made of like inkjet prints, photographs of my family, the Chinese community, like historic pictures, and as well as like a variety of different like Chinese takeout menus that I had collected like from different Chinese Canadian restaurants within 150 kilometer radius of Ottawa and Gatineau. So I was looking, that weekend I was looking around my studio because we were all in lockdown, and I was thinking, you know, like, what do I have to work with? So I'm working on that series. So then I think it was March 15th, I had made my first pandemic mask, which is that one sitting on the plinth. And then March 17th, I had posted it online because I saw all my friends, including myself, like we were all kind of like lost and languishing, and no one had inspiration. So I decided to post it online, thinking, you know, like, what's the feedback I'm gonna get? And to my surprise, like everyone was really supportive. All my fellow artists, like we kind of, you know, something clicked in our brains, and it kind of initiated the first, you know, steps of inspiration. You know, like we have time, like artists were used to isolating, we're used to being alone, we're used to being introverted and introspective. So this is kind of like a blessing. It's like a good time to make art. Like we can kind of like spend a lot of time to reflect. Yeah, so then the second mask, like I said, you know, my family's restaurant, the Shanghai restaurant, is pretty old. We're 50 years old. So I have boxes of old menus, like iterations of different kind of menus over the history. And it's all paper ephemera. And the one on the right-hand side with the tassels, I kind of mixed up materials. I like to, the material is the message in my works mostly. And I like to imbue things with my stories and my histories. So these were kind of objects that kind of held memory and history for me, and it helped me connect to my ancestors, who I drew strength from. But it also was like a way to kind of like reverse the gaze of the hatred that was happening in the world against Asians. So it was kind of a way for me to transform that hate into like strength and power and resilience, and also to like document this time in history, because it's pretty unprecedented. I looked back at previous, like, what was it, SARS, I think, SARS, like severe acute respiratory syndrome. So something that helped me get through this period is that I've kind of gone through these periods of, you know, isolation and hate towards Asians already. So going through it, going through SARS and the AIDS crisis, like growing up through the AIDS crisis, like those kind of gave me tools somehow to kind of like overcome the obstacles and kind of like rise above it. Yeah, so once I posted the initial mask on the left online, later on, a friend of mine, Suzanne Heath Eves, she is a documentary artist. I think her tagline is "She Films." She's my Facebook friend, and then later on that month or something like that, she contacted me and she invited me to be part of a group, which was the Breathe group. And I thought, you know, like, you know, I have nothing to do. I'm languishing. Like, I'd love to connect with other artists like through this time. So then that's kind of how it started. They accepted me, and it was so nice to like be able to, you know, see other people's creativity, and we kind of all worked together. The group has been really transformative for me.
Dawn, there's so much that you have brought to the table here. I mean, it's fascinating the way that these archival materials are speaking not only to the cycles of history of racism that you and your family have experienced, and but taking this into the current moment in the way that you've used this material. This connection with the Breathe group, I do want to get to have a chance to talk about that a bit more with you and your fellow artists. We haven't heard from Lisa though yet, and there is this connection with the stories that have come to the fore during the pandemic that Lisa has talked about with her ancestors as well. And so I'll give her a moment, and then we can open it up to the group. In the meantime, if anybody who has joined the call has some questions, please do drop them into the chat. If as you as artists if you have questions for each other, let's get to those too. But I do want to hear from Lisa first.
Hi, thank you. So Tanshi, Deshigashan, Lisa Shepherd, Amisquitchi, Waskahikin, Ochinia, Makadiniwakin, Katessi and Kwantlen First Nations shared territory. So I'm originally from Edmonton, and I now live on the west coast of BC, Katessi and Kwantlen shared territory. This is just fantastic being able to get together as a group like this and talk. The mask that I did for this collection, the second wave collection, is called Legami Familiari Un Mundo et Parte. And what that means is family ties a world apart. So for me, as a Métis artist, what I do is help bring Métis people visibility. It's always a celebration of identity and an exploration of identity. During COVID, though, it felt like the world got very small. You know, like I feel like we go through our day-to-day, you know, looking to the right, looking to the left. You know, our world is our family and our community, but it's all quite close by. And when the pandemic happened, it really felt like we just got sucked back in space and the world became very small. And we started thinking about what was going on in other parts of the world. And so by the time we came around to the second wave, one of the concerns that I had, my mom is Italian. I grew up, our household was very Métis and Italian. However, the Italian was really talked about and celebrated every Sunday. Was a big family gathering that my grandma would cook all day. And when you would get to Grandma and Grandpa's house, there was nowhere to put your patush because every one of the couches and chairs were covered with a tea towel and fettuccine was drying. And so, you know, we had these big family celebration thanks to Grandma and Grandpa, you know, pulling everybody together. On the other side of the family, the Métis side of the family, it was never hidden that we were Métis. You know, within our family, it was something that we always knew about. It was a way of life, but it wasn't something that we really talked about outside of the family. And so by the second wave, one of the things that I started thinking about was my family in Italy. So my cousin Luciano and Marina, wondering how they were doing, because at that point in the pandemic, we were seeing that the numbers were really climbing very quickly in Italy, and I was so worried about them. But because of our ability to connect over the internet, I was actually able to visit with them a lot more than we normally do. And so for myself, there was a really an introspective exploration on who I am in a much bigger way and more in-depth way. I started thinking about wanting to do a mask that really showed my full identity, because again, trying to always make Métis visible, and then quite literally, you know, we're covering half our face, and, you know, wanting to be able to have identity come through in a really authentic way. So I started thinking about combining the Métis floral beadwork with some of the colors that I remembered seeing around my grandma and grandpa's home growing up. So the muted beige and pinks and blues that you see there, I was thinking about the Capodimonte porcelain vases and that kind of thing that Grandma and Grandpa had around the home, and those are where the colors came through. But then I really wanted to work with materials and designs that were very much Métis. The idea of a Venetian mask was really inspiring to me. And with the Venetian mask, the top half of the face was covered. It was a way of disguising, people would disguise themselves so that when they got together for big events and parties, they were hidden, used as a way to protect them during these sexual exploits. And, you know, here we are in this pandemic, we're covering the lower half of our face, and I was wanting identity to come through. So that was kind of where this idea of this mask was coming from. It's got the buckskin tail on it, which is the first hide that I tanned was buckskin. And so I wanted to include that buckskin tail on there. And yeah, and just have identity shine through.
Again, the textures that sort of the different ancestry that you carry within you certainly comes through in this mask. Lisa, I'm sort of struck by this idea that you were able to connect with your Italian family online during the pandemic in a new way. It sort of is reminiscent of one of these really wonderful aspect of the Breathe project, which has been the ability for this opportunity to make centered on a single type of object, a mask, but it brings everybody together with an ability for you all to share your own stories that are so different. And you're coming together online as artists. So, you know, during this time of distancing and separation, you all have in some way talked about how it was a struggle or in the early days and not looking for inspiration and not being sure where to go. And then finding this group, this collective online that helped either propel your work forward and give you that inspiration, or to support the work that was already happening for you in your practice. Naomi, I see you nodding, and actually you were one of the first to talk about this, where to start during the pandemic with beading. You mentioned that you didn't want to bead, and that was such a foreign experience for you. So maybe you can talk about your experience of connecting with this group of artists and others online.
Well, the Breathe project, Facebook has always been a challenge for me, social media in general, but I kept trying to join the Breathe group officially. And I kept having issues with it, and I'm like, oh, like I really want to, and I would always go and I would check out, see what everybody was doing, and I kept saying to Natalie, I go, I can't join, but it still inspired me, and I still made those connections with fellow artists, and so that part of the journey was really important, because it really did become the catalyst to get back into some sense of normalcy. And for me, that is always creating something, always working with my hands. And so when I was kind of on a hiatus from that, I was like kind of going, this is really not normal for me. Like normally I would be doing things. And so I had quite a few conversations with different people about that. Lisa mentioned she felt similar. And so having that, I guess, support, regardless of where we were, and the ability to be able to follow each other online, see what each other were doing, it really, for me, cemented the idea that no matter what we're going through, I have to stay true to myself and continue to create pieces, even if I'm in a situation that I'm not fully understanding or comfortable with. And at the beginning of the pandemic, that was the first time I'd ever walked into stores and literally saw empty shelves. I've never seen that before. And so all of these anomalies had me, I don't know if it was almost like in a panic mode, but it certainly was interfering with any kind of sense of peace that I would normally have. And usually when I'm creating my work, I always describe it when I'm talking to people about it. I go, oh, this is my happy place, or this is a healing thing for me. And I would use all of these descriptives to sort of suggest that whenever I'm creating something, I'm always, in a good space. And so the Breathe connections that I had helped with that. It helped me find that space that I felt that I had temporarily lost, or that I didn't feel inspired about. And when I saw and read everybody's stories, and there were stories of survival, stories of triumph, stories of, resilience, I really embraced that. And I really appreciate it. Like I said, Lisa and Natalie were quite instrumental in giving me the nudge that I needed to be part of the group and really be inspired by what everybody was doing. And Dawn, I really appreciate your stories too. And those of you that have suffered losses, I just also want to say my condolences, okay? Because I've been listening. Thank you, Miigwech.
Lisa and Natalie, thank you, Naomi, first. Thank you for sharing that experience. Lisa and Natalie, what has it been like to watch this community grow over the last whatever it's been, almost a year and a half?
For me, it's been nothing short of amazing. At the beginning of the pandemic, I had plans, unlike I was going to do like a series of paintings, and I was going to do this, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, the world isn't quite coming to an end. We have to sit still, but now is the time to make art. I finally have time. But then when the group started to grow and I started seeing the stories, and I think I can connect with something that each and every one of the artists in tonight's panel has said at some level. You know, I started to realize early on that whatever I had planned was not nearly as important as what was happening with Breathe. We have been, it's like Dawn was saying, we have been creating artifacts that describe a specific moment in time, not just here in Canada, but around the world. And we've never seen that before. So I think, you know, early on watching it, not knowing where it was going to end up, I'm absolutely blown away at what it's become, the friendships I've made, you know, all the participants and the support from outside organizations, from the CBC, from all the different galleries, and even people who were just, you know, what can I do to help? What can I do to help this project grow? It brought so many people together in a new way that we haven't seen before. And that, to me, has been the ultimate success, because it's not based on some kind of system that's already in place. It's something very, very new, and it's from the heart. And so for that, I am so incredibly grateful.
Yeah, I think I'm so grateful that I had a collaborator with this, that I was, you know, I had Natalie by my side, though we're quite a distance apart.
Likewise, my friend.
You know, both of our families went through loss over this past year. And, you know, we very much were able to pick up the ball for the other person and run with it when we needed to. And, you know, I think that this pandemic has proven to all of us how connected we are to each other, you know, how much we really need each other. For myself, I also felt how much I'm connected to land. We are, I mean, we all are, but speaking from my own perspective, how connected I am to land. You know, my mom and dad are in Alberta. I'm in BC. I miss them. I miss the land. I really wanted to just like touch Alberta soil, like be home for a little while. And then, you know, the idea of, you know, would I ever be able to return to Italy and see family there? Or like, is this it? Am I ever going to see them again? You know, that again, that being on that land where I would feel my grandma and my grandpa's spirit and have that place that feels like home. So I think us coming together in like this global way in this community was just so important. It's been incredible watching people support each other. I'm so impressed by the vulnerability that people were willing to share with the group. And it always felt like the vulnerability was being shared as much so that it would reach other people who were going through the same thing, as it was, I'm going to share this vulnerability to help myself. It was very much like, I'm going to share this because I know others are going through the same thing. And it's just been incredible. It's been humbling. I think that for myself, I've had moments of just feeling very, very small that this group has taken on a life of its own, and it's been awe-inspiring. And I really believe that if we can pull this off at a time when we didn't know what to expect as far as economy, we didn't have any kind of funding for the museums, the host venues, the art galleries. You guys put together an exhibition. When will you open? I don't know. Will you open in person? We don't know. You know, but doing it anyway, I think we all just really learned to live in the moment and just be grateful for what we have, living in the moment and making the very most of it. And, you know, there's been so many teachings along the way. It's been absolutely awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I'm definitely this is going to live with me for the rest of my life for sure. And all the friendships and the teachings and the respect, that's the one thing too, that I can say is online and even in the friendships that we've taken outside of, you know, the group, the respect that we have for each other is tremendous. You know, and for that as well, I'm truly grateful, you know. Okay, I'll shut up now.
No,
Good words. I agree with
yes.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, this is, I'm a changed person because of this group, really.
It is a sense of gratitude. It truly is. I just wanted to say that.
I loved seeing all the different varieties of the different voices. You know, artists have an ability to see the unseen. And I think this group, because mostly it's Indigenous and Métis, and I'm thankful to be part of it as a Chinese Canadian. Like my content always, yeah, my content is always different on the Breathe group, but I love seeing everyone's reactions to it. But also, it's like I think like beadwork has been around for centuries, but it hasn't. I love the fact that it's been celebrated. You know, like that it's being represented and people are you know, appreciating the craft and seeing it applied in a contemporary like way. And I think the Breathe group has really helped to like push the needle in the beadwork community.
You know, I've been amazed at the amount of diverse talent that we have across this country that we've never seen anywhere. You know, so to be able to see all these different styles and all these different techniques and all these different mediums come together, and what people and artists are doing with these things has been just absolutely incredible. We have so much amazing talent across this country.
It's
how many members in the Breathe group to date? Like, do you guys know?
I haven't checked lately, but it's in the thousands.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sneaking on and checking while we do this.
Please check, Lisa. Let us know. The one thing that I am really struck by is, I mean, you've all been so generous with your stories, your thoughts, your making, and yet you're expressing such gratitude to each other for creating this sense of community. There also seems to be a great sense of catharsis or hope or uplift in these works, which is kind of incredible to see at such a challenging time. Dawn, you said, you know, one of the questions you explored was, what is resilience? And hearing your stories and looking at these masks with the new lens, hearing your words, it's sort of, it seems to me that these masks express an incredible sense of resilience in the face of everyday personal struggles and real challenges and loss and grief, deep grief and isolation. As well as some of these larger issues like racism and the effects of colonial history in this country. These are all incredibly challenging things to explore, and yet it seems like there's this sense of hope and uplift that is present in the materiality of your masks, but also in the way that you talk about the masks. How was the process of mask making itself? How did that help you sort of reflect on some of these issues and these ideas that you wanted to pursue? Well, John, yes, please jump in.
I love using like unconventional materials. So I'm always, like I said, like I'm always the medium is sometimes the message, and like I imbue like something as simple as a lantern or a tassel or like a Chinese take-up menu, and I kind of create work that kind of expands and creates a broader conversation. So it's kind of like it's like the key to the door that opens your mind to like or to a bigger story. And then I'm hoping that story is about, history and what identity or belonging means. So I'm constantly asking like myself the questions like what what is identity, what does belonging look like? What I think artists, we have the ability to kind of like shape the future. So I'm always asking, like, you know, what does the future look like? So by doing these works, for me, it's like a way to kind of like push the envelope to make a better world, you know, like, because we all want a better life and a better world for us all. It's just, how do you get your voice heard? Yeah, that's a struggle, I guess.
Yeah,
Working with material, it's like so delicate. It's paper, right? So it's very, I put it through like a torturous kind of process too. Sometimes I put it through like under hot water, and then sometimes I've like manhandled the menu and the paper to shape it. So I've learned a lot of different techniques to kind of how to manipulate the piece to how I want it to look like. My primary tool is that sewing machine back there. I'm in my studio. So you could see in the back, I have like all my work. So the mask is actually, for me, it's something very simple to make, because I've made more elaborate pieces, like big, large, like 6 foot by 4 foot quilts. You know, I'm working on a dress for my mother right now, all out of old like inkjet prints of family photographs. So I've learned to kind of like the mask making has taught me different skills to apply to my craft. So it's always, so the year of during the pandemic, I've learned so much in isolation.
Was there something about the simplicity of making a mask compared to a dress, that process of making that was able to help you sort of bring ideas to the fore?
Yeah, sometimes, like, you know, like sometimes I'll be inspired and I'll make something in a day, and then sometimes I languish on a project and it'll take me like 3 years. Like the dress for my mother is actually taking me 3 years to make, just because of the emotional process. I mean, it's sometimes it's emotional, and it's all those hurdles that are involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that the paper menus are, you know, I've got stacks of them, and from the restaurant's on hold, so I have like boxes of old Shang menus that I can kind of like, you know, use, and it's a very forgiving material.
Teresa, I don't know if you are still there, Teresa, because unfortunately we can't see you, but if you are there, oh, you are wonderful.
I'm listening. I'm sorry that I can't see everybody.
That's okay.
I just sit here and nod my head, and it's probably good that I'm actually not on, because, you know, I'd be, you know, picking at something on my face or doing some odd, you know, kind of facial expression, because I am just sort of smiling at the comments that people are making and kind of doing the little "me too," you know. It's being part of this group it always sort of harkened back to, I really enjoyed the experience of being part of Christy Belcourt's VAMP project, Walking with Our Sisters, where people from across Canada and the US made all sorts of VAMPs for missing and murder Indigenous women, and that going on tour. And I was just sort of blown away by the diversity and the artistry of so many different artisans. And so when I saw that Breeze was doing this, it got that excitement going for me again, because I like everyone else, also felt, what do I do now? There were grief issues I was dealing with. There was, you know, struggling, but I'm a person who has many projects going simultaneously. And like Dawn said, some of the pieces take up to 2, 3, 4 years to do. And the mask was a way to sort of focus myself to say, do something, make something, contribute, and just because it doesn't take a long time or it's a smaller item doesn't mean that it isn't a powerful little voice in a time when we need lots of powerful little voices to come together and be shared as a group and a collective with very similar narratives, just told in different ways.
I have actually, Lisa, I see that you've added in a question, maybe directly to me. Thank you, Teresa. I'm so glad you're still there and that you're listening and still being part of this conversation. And I mean, I have to say, I was struck by the conversation you had around taking so much time to make the mask and revisiting masks that you had been working on before and bringing it back and finishing them and contributing for those of us who like myself who get to see these masks, even though I'm not a contributor, there's so much that you bring to our experiences as well. So yes, like wonderful, wonderful contributions. There's a question here for TAALRUMI, just wondering on this question of connectivity in this online world. Have you felt like the world is more dialed in to knowing the North since we're all connecting more virtually? And has that distance, that physical distance shrunk, or does it sort of still feel?
I feel like, yeah, I think the distance is shrinking because, you know, we're all online and there's so many, you know, content creators and just regular everyday people showing their lives, and it's more accessible to hear the stories, find out the history from our point of view. Whereas before, you know, we were the ones being studied. We'd read about ourselves from, you know, other people's point of view, outsiders' point of view. So all this online, all these forums is a really great opportunity to share who we are and like what we do, how we live with the world. And that's part of what I'm doing with my artwork, is being able to tell our stories, our history from our point of view, from my point of view. And I just think that's so important, especially for all the younger generations, young Inuvialuit, to see that it's possible that they can, you know, have their voices heard. They can share who they are, our history. And yeah, it's just really, it's wonderful. And I've been able to harness some of this on other social media, just sharing, again, our history and our stories.
And do you feel that you're being heard in a different way, perhaps now? I mean, I sort of reflect on the fact that we've all talked about having a different sense of time. So perhaps we're connecting with each other in new ways and developing relationships in new ways.
Yeah, something I was telling my husband. So in my university days, every chance I got, I would do research papers, presentations on Inuvialuit. It was so important to me. And most of the time, nobody cared, you know, no applause, just crickets. There's times where I'd be in tears after presentations, just nobody really cared. But now I'm noticing such a big difference. Like, people notice, they want to hear more, you know, I'm getting positive feedback. They're enjoying the stories or the artwork or the, you know, the fashion that I'm sharing. And it's just really such a wonderful thing to see this positive change, you know, like the things are opening up. People want to know more and they want to learn, they want to hear our stories, and they are being respectful. It's wonderful.
I'm glad to hear that that feels like a two-way conversation, going both ways. And if you haven't already, to all of the artists who are speaking tonight, I hope you pop up in the chat. There's much more in the way of gratitude to all of you for contributions, your stories, sharing your work, sharing your life, sharing your thoughts with us. So take a quick look before we say goodbye. Here at the Art Gallery, is there any parting thoughts? I'm gonna probably, I don't want to, but I do feel as though I should probably take this time to say goodbyes. If you have any parting thoughts.
I just wouldn't mind adding in one thing, and that's that I feel like I have learned so much about my brothers and sisters across the nation than I ever knew before. And I feel like that's where we get rid of racism. That's where we get rid of not understanding. You can't spend time with somebody and hear about their family and see their struggles on a personal level and not feel compassion, not feel empathy, not feel love. And so I feel like that's that coming together, that is one thing the pandemic has actually given us.
Absolutely, agreed. So here at the Art Gallery, this is the second exhibition that we'll be touring, and we're working on organizing that tour. But this is just an indication, we think, of a project that continues to expand. Breathe is a living, growing, expanding experience that is connecting artists and connecting audiences with artists through digital and physical spaces. So certainly for the gallery, I know that taking on coordinating this project has been about being responsive and being able to hear stories about experiences during the pandemic, but experience that also expand well beyond the pandemic, histories, ancestries, and the futures and the hope that you have for what might be next. So I also understand that there are a number of masks that are also being collected. I've heard that the New York Public Library, the Smithsonian, other museums are contacting artists. And I think not to put too much weight on the idea of collecting, but it sort of is an indication of the importance of these works of art as an archive of this current moment in time, and all that has sort of led up to this moment in terms of your work, your practice. So again, thank you all for being part of this really important project that is happening at a pivotal moment for all of us. I would like to just mention that we are hosting Breathe. We're really honored here at the Art Gallery of Guelph to host Breathe. We are hosting it well into and through the summer and into the fall. We have it open until the beginning of October, so that anyone and everyone who is able to come and see these masks, I encourage you to come see them in person, because as we all know, with such beautiful objects and works of art that you have created, seeing them in person is just so much. There's so much there that we gain that we don't see online. So please do visit the Art Gallery of Guelph website, and I hope you'll plan your visits if you're able to. I know some of you are joining us from near and very far. So I also want to thank you all for being part of our discussion tonight, to the 6 of you who are here, but also all of the artists who are represented in the Breathe project, both in our exhibition and online. It's been powerful and poignant work, and clearly shown that art can make tangible social change and tangible community. A little, just another mention of some other things happening here at the gallery. We are, if handcrafted work is part of the way that you experience and process, we're hosting a workshop online, so you can join us from anywhere. It's a 2-part workshop on July 22nd and 29th. It's about autobiographical embroidery and applique. So just using this idea of exploring identity and self-expression through textiles. So visit our website at to find out more information. And this will be led by the Textile Museum of Canada's education coordinator, Yen Nemirovsky. They're a wonderful textile artist that is going to help us all sort of explore these ways of making as a form of self-expression. So again, we hope to be opening soon. We hope to see you here. In the meantime, I want to say just a heartfelt thank you to all of you for sharing so much of yourselves and for bringing us these wonderful works and organizing this incredible community of artists. So on that note, I will say thank you again.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
very much.
Everyone.
Bye.